Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from RAU'S.
All those who are scoring 90 plus marks in the prelims examination have a very strong chance to clear the prelims. Now you should start preparing for the coming mains examination without any confusion. RAU'S has launched General Studies Mains Test Series and Quality Improvement Program for Mains 2020. The goals of the program are: first, revision of the most important themes from the perspective of mains examination. For this, there will be Mains Compass, which are subject-wise compilations, and Quality Improvement Program classroom discussions. Second, fine-tuning of answer writing approach through rigorous testing, sample answers, evaluation and personal mentorship from the teachers. Third, simulation of exam-like testing through tests which will help you understand the art and science of answer writing along with honing your time management skills. The new batch is starting from 16th of October, so enroll now and better your chances to clear the mains examination. The link to enroll for this program and its detail are given in the description of the video.
Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. Today we have taken up Delhi edition of The Hindu newspaper dated 20th of October 2020. The articles which we are going to cover today are displayed on the screen. We are also going to cover the reasons why we have not taken up few articles. Let us now begin the discussion. Today is one of those days where the newspaper is extremely depleted as far as UPSC syllabus is concerned. Most of the editorials are either political in nature or irrelevant for our syllabus, and that is why we have taken this particular opportunity to cover the issue of media ethics. HC asks Zee News to disclose source of report on Delhi riots appears on page number 1. Where the Delhi court on Monday directed Zee Media Corporation Limited to submit an affidavit disclosing the source of its news on an alleged disclosure statement of a Jamia Millia Islamia student Asif Iqbal Tanha, who was arrested in a case related to February riots. And not just this particular news, but apart from this, throughout the year, we have seen a lot of incidents where it was alleged that media has wavered from the path of ethics. And so, it is important for us to cover the ethics in journalism. It is a very important topic for our GS4 syllabus. Now here I would like to emphasize that this particular topic has been covered in our Compass on Ethics and Integrity, which was launched yesterday, which you can go on ELEARN website and download the PDF for free. And so in this particular discussion, we will start by first understanding the duties of journalist and journalism. Then we will talk about the ethical issues which are being observed currently in India, and then we will talk about ethics of journalism. This discussion is going to equip you with the basic knowledge and understanding of ethics in journalism. And so let us now begin the discussion by first understanding what are the duties of a journalist. Now, one thing you should always keep in mind that whenever you talk about media, it is just not television news channels. It is a wide spectrum which includes newspapers, online journalism as well as television. And so first, let us begin the discussion by first understanding the duties of journalism. And first and foremost duty of journalist or journalism as a profession is to uphold the truth. Uphold the truth through verification. So the press is responsible for reporting, but just not reporting. The press should be reporting the truth. It is important for journalists to uphold the importance of objective verification. This means that it should consistently test every fact used in her story, including researching all information shared with their users. And so, the first and foremost duty of journalists is to bring out the truth through verification in front of their readers, viewers, or watchers. Then, next important duty of journalist is to do unbiased reporting. The report should be unbiased. So what can be the examples of unbiased reporting? Or how you can ensure it? So, an easy way to understand this is that, let's say if a journalist has a financial interest or a conflict of interest in a particular subject, that person should give the report to someone else. Or let's say if the company that owns a news agency has a financial interest in a story, the agency should take extra care to ensure its reporting is not affected. And so, an important task of journalists is to remove first the conflicts of interest. And the second important task for an unbiased reporting is that all the sides of a particular issue or a cause should be reported. She should present all sides as well as the viewpoints of a matter. And that is when a reporting becomes unbiased. Then an important duty of a journalist is to act as a watchdog for saving the interests of the public. So that should be the basic motivation behind journalism. A journalist should always remember that her duty is towards the public and not towards the government or any other interest group as well. They should always hold the government and others in power accountable to the citizens. And that is only possible if they are truly independent from the government. And that is when they can act as watchdog. We all know that government is very, very powerful, and hence the power dynamics is tilted heavily in the favor of the government, and hence the journalists serve as a watchdog to balance government power and hold it accountable to its citizens. And then finally, the journalism should act as a forum for public discussion. It should allow avenues to the common man to criticize the government as well as the mega corporations. In most cases, media should actually act as an initiator of a discussion on a particular topic which is of public interest. And if media is not doing any or all of them, then there are issues involved because of which the media is not doing that. And let us now understand the ethical issues involved in journalism in present context. We have understood the importance of verification, fact-checking, and what we see today is that most of the reporting is not based on collection of information and its verification. We know that media should collect information from the primary and authentic sources, and that is what makes a reporting unbiased. But currently, the process of verification is quite obfuscated and it is not done properly. Most of the media reports are based on views and opinions of the publication house rather than the objective verification. Then there are other factors which kill the neutrality of the media. And first and foremost is the politically partisan role being played by the journalist and journalism in current context. So we have seen how various media houses in our country have become advocates of different political parties and also the voice of corporates. And we need to understand the reason behind it. Earlier, the media was controlled by the state, especially the television media. After privatization, the companies were allowed to own and operate channels. So mainstream media became corporatized to spread its business as well as to acquire advanced infrastructure. Now, what happened when media became corporatized? Now, in earlier times, in 1960s and 70s, when media was limited mainly to the publication of newspapers, most of the newspapers were headed and controlled by the senior journalists themselves. But arrival of private TV channels enabled the corporatization of news media houses. And so, it did two things. First, is that their control went into the hands of big corporates. For example, a lot of channels currently are controlled by Reliance Industries. And secondly, since they were controlled by private companies which were motivated by the profit orientation, their sole motive of opening a news channel was to earn profits. Now, the focus rather than on reporting became on maximization of revenues. Now, you can easily think of the consequences of such a change. When control goes to big corporates, when such mega corporations control private news channels, these corporations have a lot of interests involved across the sectors. They operate companies, they have court cases going on, and so due to this passage of the control in the hands of corporates have impacted or killed neutrality. And then the emphasis on revenues means that you are highly dependent on advertisement or advertising revenues And we know that biggest advertiser in our country is government itself. And so, in order to earn the government ads, the advertisements from the government, you will not be critical of the government. If you become critical, government will stop giving you advertisements. And that is what has killed the neutrality. Also, the advertisers, usually private companies, demand coverage of various issues in a particular manner. That is the condition they put in order to give the advertisement, and that also has led to the killing of neutrality. So this is a very, very important ethical issue involved with the media, publications, newspapers across the spectrum in journalism. Then there are other issues as well. For example, a grave matter of media trial and paid news. So media trial, or you can also call it trial by media, is a phrase which actually describes the impact of television and newspaper coverage on a person's reputation by creating a widespread perception of guilt or innocence before a verdict in a court of law has been given. And a very good example to show that would be the case of demise of Sushant Singh Rajput. The media narrated the entire story of the late actor's death in a manner so to induce the general public to believe in the complicity of persons indicted. And the media has gone a step further and published information based on mere assumptions and suspicion about the line of investigation by the officials. Such reporting has brought an undue pressure in the course of fair investigation as well as the trial. And so it seems like media is parallelly conducting an investigation as well as the trial, which is against the fundamental right given in Article 21, right to fair trial and investigation. And so that is a big problem. And also it is a violation of journalist ethics. And finally, the matter of paid news. So paid news is a practice of cash payment to journalists and media organizations by individuals or companies so as to appear in their news articles and to ensure positive coverage. And so there are a lot of articles which appear like a reporting, which appear like a news item, but in essence or in reality, they are an advertisement, but they are written in such a manner that you won't be able to distinguish between a news article and an advertisement. So you can say that it is an advertisement which is disguised as news, and that is why it is called paid news. And all these factors together would mean that the duty of the media to equip citizens with unbiased information and to broaden the thinking of the citizens will be compromised. And that is where the role of restatement of ethics in journalism comes into play. So whenever in the mains GS4 answers, if a question is asked on ethics of journalism, what you are going to write in 100 to 150 words. So first and foremost, journalism is about accuracy and fact-based communication. Journalists cannot always guarantee the truth that is given, but getting the facts right is the cardinal principle of journalism that cannot be compromised. Journalists should always strive for accuracy, give all the relevant facts and ensure that they have been duly checked as well. Then the significance of independence in journalism can never be overemphasized. A journalist should never ever compromise on his or her independence. Now we have seen the compromise on independence and how it's made. So for example, they should not be under the pressure of the corporate owner of the news channel, for example. They should never hold any particular conflict in any other companies, especially in the fields in which they do the reporting. For example, a journalist dealing with the financial matters should not be dealing with the shares at the same time. And so the basis of independence is the disclosure. So having a conflict of interest is not such a grave sin, but not disclosing it is the biggest sin. So for example, a journalist might have conflicts, but if he or she discloses it in the news articles that the person writing or the author writing this particular article is also a shareholder of Tata Industries and that article is about how Tata Industries is being managed, that is not a problem because the reader knows that there is a conflict involved. And hence after independence, accuracy comes the fairness and impartiality. Most stories, we all understand, have at least two sides to them. While there is no obligation to present every side in a particular piece news item, the stories produced by journalists should strive for balance and provide context. Now, you should always note here that fairness, impartiality is a different thing, but objectivity is altogether different thing. So there are certain issues where there are no two sides. For example, in a matter involving rape as well as the murder, the brutality and inhumanity cannot be denied, and so there cannot be two sides. But in most matters, there are two sides to every issue. And so the journalist should be expected to produce the news article with all fairness and impartiality. And that leads us to the matter of humanity. Journalists should always strive to cover vulnerable sections of society with priority. Because we should understand that upper middle class, corporates, government officials, they have a lot of resources as well as access to power, and they are themselves sufficient to take care of themselves. But in case of vulnerable sections, people belonging to the poor stratas of society, or people belonging to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe sections, and similarly many others, should always be on priority of the journalists. And finally, just like any other pillar, the journalists are not beyond accountability as well as transparency. Journalists should always be open and transparent in their work, except in most extraordinary circumstances. For example, they are dealing with government secrets or any other kind of corporate secret. And hence, when they make mistakes, they should not only acknowledge it, but also have the guts to correct it. So yesterday we organized an open discussion session on GS1, which was based on our first full-length test discussion. If you remember, in that particular discussion, I discussed how to make notes so that you can save a lot of time while in examination. So if you go through this video which was published yesterday, you will realize the importance of notes making in mains examination. And so it is very, very important to prepare this particular topic of ethics in a manner that whatever question comes, you will have necessary material to tackle it. And that is why, to cover everything, you will need 2 pages to make notes on duties of journalism, ethical issues involved, and ethics of journalism. Let's now move on to the next news. Many gains in fighting HIV appears on page number 7. This article lays emphasis on the newly released 2019 HIV estimates by National AIDS Control Organization, which is a Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. And hence, in this regard, it is important for us to understand not just the HIV, its treatment, but also what are the programs being run by India to counter the prevalence of HIV. And from the perspective of prelims examination, this is very, very important. Because in 2018, UPSC had asked which one of the following statements is not correct. You have to read the questions carefully. Statement A was, hepatitis B virus is transmitted much like HIV, which is obviously correct. Then the next statement was, hepatitis B, unlike hepatitis C, does not have a vaccine, which is incorrect because hepatitis B vaccine is the most important way to counter hepatitis B through prevention. And so this statement was incorrect. Whereas statement C was correct, which was globally, the number of people infected with hepatitis B and C viruses are several times more than those infected with HIV. And statement D was also correct, which was some of those infected with hepatitis B and C viruses do not show the symptoms for many years. So you can understand that these important diseases, the prominent diseases, need to be understood for prelims examination. And similarly in 2010 as well, the question was asked. So if we talk about the current status, India has an estimate 2.14 million persons living with HIV and records around 87,000 new infections and 69,000 AIDS-related deaths annually. And so in this regard, it is important for us to have a look at 2019 HIV estimates by National AIDS Control Organization. You can see it's a division of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. And 3 important observations which we think are important for you to keep in mind. The first one is that there has been a 66.1% reduction in new HIV infections among children and around 65% reduction in AIDS related deaths in India over 9-year of period. So which is a very good news, which means that the steps taken by the central government as well as the state governments are bearing fruits. Then the number of pregnant women living with HIV has also reduced from 31,000 to 20,000 in 2019. And third is overall antenatal coverage has expanded. So antenatal means before birth. And it is very, very important to keep a track of HIV before a child takes birth. And so the coverage has expanded and HIV testing has increased over time. Also, the treatment coverage has increased. It is important to keep in mind that the Sustainable Development Goal 3.3, which was about ending the epidemics of AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria by 2030, we are right on track of that because still we have a decade of time left, and the kind of pace we have shown, the kind of improvement we are doing, it seems like we are going to achieve this target. And hence, let us now discuss few basic facts about HIV. So we know that HIV is a virus which attacks CD4, a type of white blood cell in body's immune system. T cells are those cells that move around the body, detecting anomalies and infections in the cells. And that is why HIV is so dangerous, because it directly attacks the cells which are responsible for immunity. After entering the body, HIV multiplies itself and destroys CD4 cells, thus severely damaging the human immune system. And how we know that a person is infected by HIV? Because the CD4 cell count of a person infected with HIV reduces significantly. A person with HIV whose CD4 cell count goes or drops below 400 per cubic millimeter is diagnosed with AIDS. So HIV and AIDS are not the same thing. A person infected with HIV is known as HIV positive. It's not necessary that he might have AIDS. The condition of AIDS is defined when the immunity is compromised at such a high level that secondary infections have started to deteriorate the situation, and that happens when the CD4 count drops below 200 per cubic millimeter. Weak immune system makes a person prone to opportunistic infections as well as cancer. And so it's just not about the infectious diseases, it is also about the cancer. And hence it becomes difficult for a person infected with this virus to recover for even a minor injury or sickness, because once an infection is acquired by HIV positive person, it becomes very, very difficult to treat that secondary infection. Although by receiving timely treatment, severe form of HIV can be prevented. As far as transmission is concerned, HIV is transmitted from person to person through bodily fluids including blood, semen, vaginal secretions, anal fluids and breast milk. To transmit HIV, bodily fluids must contain enough virus. A person with undetectable HIV cannot transfer HIV to another person even after transfer of fluids, and that is where the importance of treatment comes into play. So for example, if a person is HIV positive, but that person is on ART, which we will discuss now, which means that that person's CD4 count cells has not dropped below 200 per cubic. So even if that person transfers blood, the chances of transfer of HIV through that blood is very, very low. And so the transmission stops if the person is on therapy. And so it is important for us to discuss commonly available treatment for HIV. First is antiretroviral therapy. It consists of the combination of antiretroviral drugs to maximally suppress HIV virus and stop the progression of HIV disease. ART also prevents onward transmission of HIV. Huge reductions have been seen in rates of death and infection when use is made of potent ARV regimen, which is a combination of many drugs, particularly in early stages of disease, and that is why early detection is very, very important. ART is now being given to people living with HIV irrespective of CD4 count. because if they are given ART even before their count drops, they never reach to the stage of AIDS. They always remain HIV positive but never actually face the consequences of that particular virus. Then, recently stem cell transplant has already been tried. A person suffering from HIV has been treated by bone marrow transplant from HIV negative but resistant donor. So there are a lot of people in this world can get infected with HIV, but the consequences of HIV are not seen of them because they have some genes which make them resistant of HIV. And so in this particular case, this person has been cured with cysteine chemokine receptor 5 delta 32 technique, which is based on a stem cell transplant involving CCR5 delta 32 donor cells. So CCR5 is a protein on the surface of white blood cells that is involved in the immune system as it acts as receptor for chemokines. Chemokines are involved in signaling the body's inflammation response to injuries. So whenever a part of a body goes through inflammation, the signal is sent through chemokines. CCR5 is most commonly used receptor by HIV-1 virus. People who have mutated copies of CCR5 are actually resistant to HIV-1 virus. So there are two commonly circulating strains of HIV, HIV-1 and 2. And so mutated CCR5 gives immunity against HIV-1. As far as the location of CCR5 is concerned, it is found in cell membranes of many types of mammalian cells, including nerve cells and white blood cells. And so when the transplant was conducted from a HIV-resistant donor to the HIV-positive person, that person also developed immunity against the HIV virus. And since this particular article is all about the improvement in the data with respect to the HIV positive people, let us now see what the governments have done to do so, to ensure this improvement. And so first, we have a National Strategic Plan on HIV, AIDS and Sexually Transmitted Infections 2017 to 2024. Which aims to achieve elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV as well as syphilis, as well as elimination of HIV/AIDS related stigma and discrimination by 2020. Then we have Mission Sampark, which was launched to bring back people living with HIV who have left treatment after starting ART for some time. Presently, about 11.5 lakh people are living with HIV are taking free ART through 536 ART centers in our country. It is a big challenge to trace those who are left to follow up and needed to be brought under ART services, and that is why Mission Sampark, or when translated into English, contact with those people who have left the treatment, was brought about. Then we have Project Sunrise from Ministry of Health and Family Welfare to tackle the rising HIV prevalence in northeastern states in India, especially among people injecting drugs. And so you can easily see that that is the place where the sun rises first in India, and that is why Project Sunrise. Then we have elimination of mother to child transmission, or EMTCT, which focuses on the prevention of parent to child transmission of HIV. Then we have 90-90-90 strategy. It is the HIV treatment program of UNAIDS, which has set targets of 90% of all people living with HIV will know their HIV status. They will be aware of the fact that whether they're HIV positive or negative. It might seem very easy, but since after infection, it might take around 5 to even 10 years for a person to develop the symptoms, and that is why most people, although HIV positive, are not aware about their HIV status. And it is very, very important for most people to know their HIV status, because then they can directly start the treatment and escape the worst consequences of the AIDS infection. So the first target is that 90% of all people living with HIV should know their status. Then 90% of all diagnosed people, all those people who have HIV, 90% of those should be receiving sustained ART. So you detected 90% of them, and among those you will ensure that 90% are on treatment, and then 90% of all receiving ART will have viral suppression. So these are the targets of 90-90-90 strategy. Let's now move on to the next news. Warehousing schemes for farmers appears on page number 5. The article talks about an agro warehousing scheme coming up near Jaipur, which will benefit farmers, and hence it is important for us to understand what negotiable warehousing receipt is. So this particular initiative was launched in 2011, which allows for transfer of ownership of a particular commodity stored in warehouse without having to deliver the physical commodity. These receipts are issued in negotiable form, making them eligible as collateral for loans. So let us now understand it. We know that farmers cultivate their grains and they harvest it. And mostly they have two options available in front of them. Either they sell them either to government or to private sector, or they can store them. Now the problem with the storage is that they have to bear the cost of the storage, and they cannot store it forever, and ultimately they have to sell it, the physical commodity, to the private sector or on MSP to the government. Now what negotiable warehousing receipt system is all about, let's say that the farmer has not sold his produce and they have stored it. Now, after they have stored it, the warehouse has their grain. Now, let's say if a person has deposited or stored around 1 ton of wheat, and so in return, they will get a receipt which will say that this person's this much amount, this much quality of grain has been stored. And now this farmer has a receipt. Now, this farmer can sell that receipt to another person, or this farmer can actually utilize this particular receipt to get the loans from the bank, because bank require a collateral. They need a guarantee, and these receipts act as a guarantee, which means that in case if farmer is not able to repay the loans, this grain shall be transferred to the bank. So it is very, very convenient for the farmer, and that is why this system has been brought. And there is a framework to regulate this as well, and the agency is known as Warehousing Development and Regulatory Authority. The Warehousing Development and Regulatory Authority, which was established under Warehousing Development and Regulation Act, so it is a statutory body. It functions under the Department of Food and Public Distribution under Ministry of Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution. And so no person shall commence or carry on the business of warehousing or issuing negotiable warehouse receipts unless he has obtained a registration certificate after fulfilling the prescribed norms in respect of the concerned warehouse or warehouses granted by the authority under this act. So this is a completely regulated sector. And so let us now understand the benefits of negotiable warehousing receipts. So first and foremost, this will help farmers to seek loans from the banks against these receipts, and they will also avoid distressed sales of agricultural produce during the peak marketing season, because now farmers have the option of selling the receipts as a future date instead of selling it immediately after the harvest. Also, the depositor can save the logistics expenses and will have better income, because now the negotiable warehouse receipts have been connected with the ENAM system. And so it is being assumed that as soon as a farmer goes to a godown, deposits his grain or any other commodity and gets the receipt, immediately that receipt will be sold off. And so instead of depending on the local market, a receipt can be bought from anywhere across our country, and so the depositor will save a lot on logistics, that is the cost to be incurred on the storage. And farmers can sell the produce across India to get better price, and at the same time can save himself from the hassles of mandi, because now it has been integrated with the ENAM system. Then farmers will be able to place their produce in accredited warehouses and avail the benefits of pledge loan. And this will also induce the price stabilization, because currently, especially in agricultural commodities, the demand and supply do not match with each other, because the market is so fragmented that you observe the increase in price in potato in some state, whereas the prices of potato at the same time in some other state is very low. And the reason behind that is that demand from this state is not being matched with the supply, because simply it is not allowed currently. And so through ENAM, through the sale of receipts nationally, the demand and supply can be immediately matched. And this particular topic is very important from the perspective of prelims examination, so keep in mind these facts. Let us now move on to the next news. This particular news appears on page number 14. Centers set to ask at least 8 PSUs to consider buybacks. So what is buyback? Buyback is a procedure that enables a company to purchase its shares from its existing shareholders, usually at a price near to a bit higher than the prevailing market price. When a company buys back, it reduces its outstanding share in the market, which increases the percentage shareholding for the remaining shareholders. So in essence, a buyback is a way through which the promoters of the company increase their stakes in their own company, which they had earlier diluted for various reasons. And so, in a buyback, the company generally offers its shareholders an option to tender a portion of their shares within a certain time frame and at a specified price. This price compensates the shareholders for tendering their shares rather than holding on to them, and so a lot of them decide to sell the shares to the promoters. Sometimes companies buy back shares on the open market over an extended period of time, just like normal people. Now, it is important for you to understand why buyback is followed. So first, we have discussed to enable the promoters to increase their stakes in the company, to improve earnings per share. It is also meant to provide an additional exit route to shareholders when shares are undervalued or are thinly traded. It also enhances the consolidation of the stake in the company. It is also followed to return surplus cash to shareholders and to support share price during periods of sluggish market conditions. When the demand for the shares are already low, promoters increase the demand of their shares by buying them back. And so that is why buyback of shares is important. This is just a term, and even a general understanding of this particular term would do for prelims examination. Now, since we have chosen to ignore a lot of articles for today's discussion, let us understand why we did not discuss them. So there were 4 articles on today's editorial page number 6, and we have not taken a single one of them. So the first column, a tool for thought, talks about the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the forecast related to it. And it talks about how we can use pandemic forecast to induce changes to avoid the worst case scenarios. Now, no point in this particular article is of worth for UPSC examination. Then the second column, the NEET challenge, talks about why states should take steps to ensure the participation and the success of students belonging to weaker section in NEET examination. And this is also not relevant for UPSC examination. Then a sorry plight of Andhra Pradesh higher judiciary is an ongoing issue which has been discussed thrice in our DNS. But not just that, this article is mainly focused on affidavit and counter affidavits being filed by the state government and various other stakeholders to this particular case, which is not required for UPSC examination. And then finally, this editorial, which is focused on the withdrawal of Tanishq advertisement from the television, and it dissects the pros and cons of that particular advertisement. Now, had this article discussed issues of communalism or issues related to the tolerance, reducing tolerance in the society, or the freedom of speech and expression, we would have taken it. But it is entirely focused on the advertisements, why it was not a bad advertisement, and hence it is not important for us to understand this article. And that is why today's paper is quite depleted as far as UPSC examination is concerned.